So I rewound a bit for this week because I am still absolutely terrified to see it, and I just can't bring myself to do it.
It's so good.
That's all on you, man. Like that's your review. But for the Mohawk movie review, I saw Detroit because I missed it when it first came out, and it stars John Boyega, Will Poulter, Algee Smith, Jason Mitchell, Hannah Murray, Anthony Mackie, John Krasinski, and a bunch of other people. And it's from Oscar-winning director Kathryn Bigelow, who did The Hurt Locker, Zero Dark 30, and a personal favorite of mine, the original Point Break.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Some rope ripping.
Oh, yeah. Patrick Swayze's my
Exactly.
dude,
Also, she's from San Carlos, which is really exciting. Yeah,
cool.
I didn't realize that until I looked this up. So I think it's fair to say that she's no stranger to these dramatic, tense situations, and Detroit is about the Algiers Motel incident during Detroit's 1967 12th Street riot. This is the point when we all ask, what is the Algiers Motel incident during the Detroit? And I didn't know about it, and I almost feel bad that I didn't know about it. So there are also kind of subjective and conflicting sides to the story, but I'm going to go ahead and believe the, victims of hate crimes and police brutality, because what do they have to hide in this scenario?
Sure.
Yeah, so the film establishes, Detroit was undergoing a lot of, racial tensions. I think the police force was something like 94% white, and, the black community was being forced into these tiny, tiny housing areas, and obviously still Detroit is not, the greatest situation to be in. And so basically there were riots that started. Also, interestingly, the music group The Dramatics was there in town, and a couple of the members of the band were involved in this incident. And so the police conducted a raid on a, not speakeasy, but like an illegal bar operation that was happening. And then so riots started, and then there was all this chaos. And several people took refuge in the Algiers Motel, including several members of the Dramatics. And then, I don't know why or how, but somebody shot a starter pistol into the air, being dumb, let's admit. It's kind of a stupid thing to do.
Yeah.
And that drew the attention of the Detroit Police Department, Michigan State Police, and Michigan Army National Guard who'd been called in. And then they murdered and beat up a bunch of the people there.
Oh, dear.
Yes. So Detroit, really dark, really depressing, really intense. The whole thing is very wound up, obviously, because it starts with the riots, right? It established through this kind of cool animation, the situation that they were in, and then you just go straight into the riots.
Okay.
So
it looks great. I watched the trailer.
It was really intense, and I think the trailer probably does a decent job of portraying the intensity, so if that's almost too much for you, but I think it's still worth seeing. Yeah, I mean, the things they do not shy away from violence, and I don't feel like it was superfluous, because I do think they were representing what was going on. People get beaten, you see people getting shot. There were, even the racial tension parts, there were a bunch of white women involved, and they got stripped naked and called a word I won't say, lovers by the police,
dear.
And so it's just humiliating and horrible and violent all around. And what's really frustrating to me about Detroit is that it's 50 years ago, and I feel like things have not improved a ton on the police brutality front.
Yeah.
And then the most frustrating thing, and this is a spoiler, but not because this is a true story, they got away with it. They were acquitted.
It's not surprising at all. It's
still
happening to this day.
It's so frustrating. And because I didn't know the story going into it, I was like, please let this be a story about justice. Please let this be some sort of hope in this. And nope. They got out. They got away with it. And so it was really frustrating to watch. And so then, obviously, subject matter, intensity, there were a lot of great scenes. I thought the performances were really good. But I have to say, from a objective movie, or I guess my subjective movie point of view, there were some flaws with it. It's tough to watch. I thought the pacing was a little rough. It was interesting because it did spend so much time building the world they were in. You don't meet really our main characters for the first, 12 minutes or something like that, which I know doesn't sound like a lot in time. But when you're sitting there and the first thing you're watching is all this violence and craziness happening, and then it's like, oh, here's some characters. It's oh, okay. So I just thought maybe we could have known more about them going into it. And they do try and establish the whole, the Dramatics are trying to make it in the music biz thing. But I was like, this feels very in contrast to the way this film was set up. So I thought there were a couple things that were challenging to watch. But I think overall the story is, I hesitate to use the word important, but I do think it's important, and I think it's relevant. And so I do think it's worth sitting through, and just be aware that it's going to be really violent. And it's going to make you uncomfortable, but I think it should make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? We're not at a point where this is a history movie and that we're so far past this. This is something that's absolutely parallel today. I actually, watching the trailer and then not realizing that it was about the 1960s riots, I was like, oh, is this about a fake riot that happens? A fictionalized riot that happens in Detroit today? Because it absolutely could have been, right? It absolutely could have been something that took place in 2017. And we probably would have been just as upset, and the results might have been just the same.
Yep.
So it's also a little tough because events during it are unclear because, they supposedly were both sides of the story. But I just want to say, obviously it's one side is right. Come on. Come on, they're hiding their evidence. So either way, film's uncomfortable, as it should be. I think it's worth watching. I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5.